So, finished an email to Chris's teacher. I didn't explain how long we've pretty much known. Mostly I've done some masking of that on purpose. I don't want to get people in trouble who may or may not have known at the school. But I'm gonna say it here because nobody really watches my videos anyway. But some of his teachers have known. We've had some help getting him help without making it official. And help isn't really what you think it is, as far as stuff, because it's more about teaching him how to cope with it and how to turn it into a strength instead of a weakness and cover for his weaknesses. If you put it like that, it's basically what any kid should be taught about their strengths and weaknesses. We haven't named it to him. We haven't given it a big scary label or connected it to things that people think. Living with the label is often harder than living with it. People decide things about you that aren't honestly true. And we don't want that for him. So now it's an email. I don't like it, but it felt like we were trapped in this situation where it was either admit or they were just going to keep on pushing ADHD on him. The thing is that she's consistently convinced that everything that he does is the best he can do. And we keep on telling her, no, it's not. And anytime anybody, comes up with something that even remotely threatens this idea, other than us, they get shut down and rushed through and out of the room. Which is what they did to the speech therapist. Because she was like, oh, well, he just does it for me whenever I ask. Nobody wanted, I guess, it to come up what are you doing different? She's probably just being consistent. Thing is, a lot of the stuff that Chris is doing in school now, a normal kid would respond very similarly. How a normal kid who'd been through the stuff that he's been through would probably respond like this. I mean, this isn't off the wall. But automatically, whenever there's a diagnosis or any sort of label, people want to attach these things to that label. And the thing of it is that you're a human being, not a label. You're a person, not a label. And we don't want him to grow up thinking that he's the label. So, he has what he needs, but, officially, we're kind of, ghosting. We know we can't do that forever, because sooner or later, some asshole is going to force our hand. And this is probably us having our hand forced. But let's just say that, we have a plan. And part of that plan involves moving to where there is a better and less stigmatized stuff. Where if he doesn't have a diagnosis, it doesn't matter. And there are places where it's like that, where people have such an intolerance for what comes along with it that it's basically become normal. What his teacher doesn't realize is that there's an entire community of people who have this. Actually, what a lot of people don't realize. And that there's an entire community out there of people who have it. And generally speaking, it's not rare for them to be successful people, to be all walks of life. There are people like me who have had a ton of shit happen to them. And then there are people who haven't. There are people who slip so far under that radar that nothing ever happens to them. Or they've just had family around them, so nothing ever happens. Like, I'm fairly convinced that half the people who did shit to me didn't even really believe that there was anything there. They just said, oh, she doesn't really have family around her, so I'm gonna do this. So, like, it's not even because I'm obvious. Because I'm not. It's something that doesn't even really... I mean, it's my normal. I don't really do anything, like, weird because of it. Well, besides, like, we'll watch a really exciting movie or something and it's, like, too much, I'll start waving my hands. But I rarely watch movies, and there's a reason why I don't do that in front of Chris. Because I don't want it to become a learned behavior. We want to see how much he's doing. And to be perfectly honest, if I can learn, he can too. Because if he's on the spectrum, he is not as far. He is, like, barely on it. We don't want him to carry the stigma and have people decide that he's not allowed to grow up and have a family and be successful. Because people decide this. And it's not like they're actively saying, no, you're not allowed. Though there are some people. It's more that they project the idea that he's not supposed to. It's really what it is. And the thing of it is that a lot of people are really successful. And they raise wonderful families and have really healthy relationships. And nobody ever wants to focus on that whenever they talk about autism. They don't want to talk about the people who are successful. They want to talk about... They don't even want to talk about the stuff that happens to the people who are so high functioning that it's not even funny. And the only people Autism Speaks wants anywhere near the idea of autism is the people who are so far in the opposite end of the spectrum from what Asperger's is that they can't, like, do anything. These are the people that you get scared of your kids being. But the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people who are able, but who have learned helplessness to extremes. Learned helplessness is basically being convinced that you can't. It's basically where you're raised with the idea that you can't. And it comes at you all over the place. From school, from home, and sometimes, home is fighting and saying, hey, you know what, they're capable. And sometimes, sometimes it ends up like some weird balance of both, and the kid's like, well, which one is it? And then, but they're still more likely to figure it out that way. I had it early on with my mom. So even though later on I had it, coming at me at all ends, I still ended up someone, if anything makes it difficult for me to actually work and all that, it's PTSD. Having this doesn't do that. This is so much a part of me, it's not even funny. And that's the thing that people don't realize. It's not that the computer is broken. It is that it is running on a different operating system. That's it. It's not broken. People with Asperger's aren't broken. People with autism, it's a different operating system. It's not that it's sickness. And most people don't want to be cured. Like, they're going on about a cure for autism, and we're like, well, you know what? A lot of people have some really good ideas, people who actually have autism, and are on the higher functioning levels, and can even live normal lives. Okay, a lot of these people have really good ideas that can help a lot of the people who aren't. And there's very few people actually listening to them. Not very many. I mean, there's a lot of people, their kids have it, and they're diagnosed, and like, Autism Speaks, help me. Autism Speaks is a bunch of bullshit. Most people who actually have it hate them with a burning passion of 1,000 hells. Okay? They hate Autism Speaks, because Autism Speaks doesn't actually speak for people who has autism. It speaks for itself. It speaks for people who benefit from the idea that people with autism are less human. And some of the crap that they say has caused no end of harm to a lot of these very same people. The idea that people with autism can't have feelings. That comes from Autism Speaks. That's why a lot of kids with Asperger's, instead of it being realized that everything is coming at them, boom, 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 and that the fact that everything coming at you all at once, there's no acceptable way for you to really express this, all the stuff that that people with Asperger's actually go through, Autism Speaks isn't speaking for them. They're not even speaking for the people that they say that they're speaking for. And that's part of the problem. Most people who have a kid who actually has autism know that there are feelings there. I mean, there's feelings, there's emotions, there's a way to reach them. You search for that way, and you find it. The thing of it is that they're living in a world that they're drowning in. And they don't necessarily have the same ability to swim in it. Think of people with Asperger's as that same shit, but with a single stronger connection in the brain that lets us swim in it. And that lets us tread water and even like build a boat or something. Picture it like living on the ocean, in the ocean, and how some people, build a boat and get out, and some people are still drowning. And you have to find them in that. It's like that. Some people, they build a boat, they learn how to swim, and some people you have to find them to show them. And they may never quite learn it the same way. That's the thing. And some people, it's not just autism, it's that their very ability to control their bowels and all that is completely shot. But the ones who can do things, like, there was this little girl, it was heartwarming. She basically painted her cat. And she had trouble acknowledging the people around her because all this shit was coming at her. And that's what people don't understand. The world is so loud, so colorful. If you can't tread the water, it's not... Some people don't find their own way out of that. Some people can be helped to find their way out of that. It's hard. And nobody's quite sure why some people can be helped out of it and some people can't. Because the research isn't in that direction. And this is just a bunch of people who have it trying to find ways to help other people who have it. It's like the ultimate peer support, except they break all the rules of peer support. And it's completely like just a bunch of people in a community trying to help other people in a community. There's no business going on here. Nobody's making any money. So it's just people wanting to help people. It's not something that you find a lot in this world, but be the change you want to see, right? On that front, there's a lot of reasons I don't normally talk about it and why I will avoid the subject. Because the same shit that goes on. I actually had someone scream at me as a kid that I couldn't have it because I was empathetic and emotional and had feelings and was quote-unquote a sweet kid. I'm sorry, but most people with Asperger's are. It's the projections that destroy us. Basically, you're doing emotional damage with it. Telling someone that they don't have feelings, that you can do all this shit because they don't have feelings, is horribly emotionally damaging. And I actually had a friend that I helped get out of a situation like that whenever I was younger. She, later ended up falling to some other crap. But I'd like to think that maybe eventually she learned. I'm not happy about one of the lessons that she learned because I heard about it. And that is where the person who assaulted me later assaulted her. At one point we were best friends. I was never going to be okay with this. But, she knew I wasn't a liar. So, maybe that was just some sort of fucked up lesson. That denial is not something that she was immune to. Because some people, like, they get on the spectrum, there's like this sort of thing that you get into, oh wow, I'm smarter than them, so they think I'm not as good as them, so I can just do all this stuff, and they won't figure it out because, see, here's the thing. Neurologically typical people, this is the general stuff I'm going to go into. There are exceptions. Neurologically typical people, a lot of their social interactions aren't rational. There can be a rational understanding of something that is purely emotional. Or, there's ways to refer to it, ways to rationally understand it and translate for it. But a lot of it has to do with purely emotional concepts. And you get into things like denial and seeing what they want to see. And someone with Asperger's, your brain does not filter to what you want to see. You don't get that choice. But you can still become determined to, see things a certain way and just not see something. So, it's something that you can still do. Like I said, there's exceptions to every rule. I'm not one of the exceptions as far as that goes. And a lot of times there's some neurologically typical people who will even claim that not, adhering to basically what amounts to political correctness, not perceiving political correctness as a valid idea, not perceiving this as nicer just because it's said with different words, because, distinction without difference, makes your thinking rigid because you're not seeing it the way that they do. Personally, that just makes them more rigid, and also assholes. But, yeah, I've actually had someone say that to me and accuse me of rigid thinking because of the fact that I was like, it still means the same thing. It means the same thing, and it's still just as offensive. So, I'm like, it's equally offensive as an idea, and this is stupid. So therefore, they accused me of having rigid thinking. That was years and years and years ago. So anyway, you can still run into that. And there's actually a lot of crap like that. And if you think about this, without the context of Asperger's, then you understand how fucked up that is. But a lot of people, they just attach the label and automatically they have a completely different way of thinking. It's like a different sort of compartmentalization. Except that doesn't work the same whenever you have Asperger's, because you have that stronger connection in the brain. Think of it like on the opposite side of the spectrum, they still have all that shit coming at them, but they're filtering too much. So, like, there's a lesser perception of what's around them. But then, whenever you're further up on the spectrum, there's a heavier perspective of what's around you, but you're not filtering it. So, that doesn't really do a lot for your awareness right away. Like, you can miss stuff. That most of it's social. And then some of it, you're just more awkward because you're literally just picking up more. And what you're not picking up is how they want you to perceive it. And then that's the thing that's being called the problem. That's what makes you socially awkward. Basically, this is also what leads some people, whenever they realize this, to come to the conclusion that neurologically typical people are idiots. There's a lot of people in the community who will go, oh my god, no. Okay, they're not idiots. In this line of thinking, just will create more of the same. And because this is the Asperger's community, most people are like, okay, yeah, you're right. There's exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, people are pretty chill, pretty just no, they can get pretty intense, but I mean, like, in that respect, there's not a lot of hate to go around, and if there is hate, it's or anger and all that, usually people are more ready to admit that that's what it is. And like, hey, if we do this, if we act like this and take this attitude, we'll just do more of the same harm that's been done to us. I can't pretend that that's always the way that it's going to be. Much the same as some communities have become a bundle of hate after years and years of propagandic crap and whatnot. It could happen. There are plenty of people who even believe that autism is Mother Nature trying to evolve how we think. Trying to evolve our brains themselves. So that human beings won't be such of a herd mentality. And believe it or not, most people with Asperger's, in some respect or another, often look at the rest of society as some giant herd of people who are just sort of following along. There's a respect for those who don't, but like even the people who are saying things like sheeple are often just following along with somebody else, not like deciding their own shit. And the thing of it is that's more society oriented, but it is something that they're more vulnerable to. We're not invulnerable to it, though. It's just harder to do that with us. It's not like we're so different that we're another species or anything. It's not actually that big of a difference. It's not physically that big of a difference. That science doesn't even really understand how different or how not different it is. A lot of it has to do with how we're raised. So a lot of us will help other people who have basically been raised to believe that they're less capable. It's more of a learned helplessness. Picture someone who is entirely capable of something. Entirely capable of everything everyone else is. And maybe even has some extra talents on top of that. And they're pretty awesome, pretty smart. Okay, now picture that they maybe feel a bit insecure. Maybe people have occasionally been shitty. And sometimes, let me just point this out, sometimes people with Asperger's can learn that being shitty gets them what they want. This is like any human being. So, yeah. Whenever people, decide, hey, I don't want to be shitty, or I want to not be helpless. There's an entire community of people who are there. Not hard to find. All you have to do is look. NT society, as far as that goes, like, it's society as a whole, okay, neurologically typical people often live a sort of illusion as far as society goes. It is easier to get them in that because their brains filter more. Think about it as the same way that they look at people who are the other end of the spectrum. They're filtering so much that it is harder to even get them to respond to any sort of interpersonal interaction. Like the little girl, the cat got through to her, but her parents had been trying for years and couldn't. Her brain is filtering. The people who study autism don't even seem to really understand that. Most of them, anyway. It's a filter issue. Like, your brain is filtering. It's filtering everything and people with that stronger connection are filtering less. Filtering less is not necessarily a bad thing. Makes you just slightly different socially as you grow up, but you're not shutting out everything. Your brain isn't like shutting out everything. And in the long run, you're actually just as capable of everything else as anybody else is. But you can still become convinced that you're not, and other people around you can still be shitty individuals who push the idea that you're not. And yes, the stigma is there even among people who are supposed to help with this. It's common. So, yeah. It's sensory. That's what people who have it, this is like the most common thing to say to people who are coming in, not because they have it, but because they have like a kid who they think has it, and they're like, well, first of all, what you need to understand is that this is not really a disability. The government may call it one, but we do not, because there are ways around it. You can very easily do so, as long as you work at it. It's actually relatively easy compared to a lot of other things. So, it's more about learning to cope with everything that's coming at you, and learning to manually filter through it. Think about it. Go through it, sort through it, like, it's a different operating system. Not a different, think about it like the stuff that works for NTs is like a floppy disk. And ours is like a USB drive. And they work for completely different operating systems. So sometimes, well, the shape may be a little bit similar. It may still have, corners. Sometimes the sides need to be different. And sometimes it needs to be just a little bit different to get the same information there. And, just because it's a different operating system. But you are still completely capable of becoming a functioning adult. Learned helplessness is something that you can unlearn. It's something that you can work through. There's nothing that has been done that cannot be worked through. The thing of it is that it is a lot easier if you just don't convince a kid that they can't do a bunch of stuff and basically teach them their entire lives that they're incapable of this. People who do this often have the best of intentions. They don't even realize that they're doing something completely fucked up. But there are communities out there. not just one. I mean, generally speaking, we find out about one, we're gonna be like, hey, yeah, great, awesome. But it doesn't mean like that we always know. That's the thing. In the community, there's generally a lot of people who are okay admitting, yeah, I have flaws. But hey, you know what? Pretending I don't would just make me a not so great person. The illusions of society and the denial is not nearly as much in the Asperger's community, mostly because that's a process from filtering. And we filter less. So we also have less of that crap too. There tends to be more honesty, more loyalty, and you need both to understand people on the other end of the spectrum. You need to not just be going, oh, science, tell me how to cure this. Why don't you try and understand the problem first? Because I feel like they don't understand the problem. I mean, you're filtering. It's a filter issue. I mean, it's sensory. It's sensory, and I can't even continue with this. It's just, you have no idea how much I've studied to even be able to say that. And it's not like official. I can like produce a degree studying, so I don't expect anybody to listen to me, especially NTs. I don't expect anybody to like be watching this and going, oh my god, this is so awesome, I'm just gonna listen to this and write my paper on it. No. But I would at least like the idea to be out there for someone to look at it and think about it, because that's what it is. It's not that people on the spectrum don't feel. Very opposite, in fact. I don't imagine that people who are filtering more feel any less than we do. But we don't have the filters that neurologically typical people have. And maybe one day we'll be what's neurologically typical. There's been a lot of debate about that. Like I said, there's a lot of people who believe that we're the next step in evolution for how the brain works. And that it's not actually a problem. It's just, it's a little bit different, and human history points out that it's actually normal for fucked up humanity to look at anything a little bit differently, a little bit different as a flaw. You see this in a lot of ways. So, yeah. Anytime humanity has had an adaptation, that's how it's been looked at. I think it's a good adaptation. If it's an adaptation, I'm willing to go for that. Because it actually fits. I mean, it fits. It may even be that autism in the first place was Mother Nature trying to adapt. Because oftentimes things like, it's not a sickness. But I believe that there's a way to help the people who are on the other end of the spectrum. But I believe that ignoring the fact that the people who can function, and what exactly is the issue, and like projecting all this other crap on it, is part of the problem. If you're filtering out all the stuff you don't want to hear and just projecting the stuff you do, you're creating your own illusion. And that makes it a lot harder to see what the problem is. If a way could be found to help them not, be filtering everything out, earlier on, theoretically, and I'm pulling off of stuff that has already been done for other stuff, theoretically, you could train the brain. Same way my little sister's brain was trained not to have seizures. Using, diet and all that stuff. Okay? You could train the brain to not filter. Like a lot of us have trained ourselves to sort through and manually sort of, filter. We've trained ourselves to do that. It's not the same, but it makes the world a little more livable if you go through and you prioritize. But it's manual again. The stuff is still coming at you. It's still going to be exhausting as fuck. But you can still live in the world like that. But like these people can't live in it. They're not living in it. So find a way to help them. Because they're still here. And maybe they want to see their mom's face and perceive it. Maybe you just have no idea the depth of feelings that's inside. And should never presume to think that any human being has no feelings. If there's a way to help various other issues where there is an issue in the brain, there is a way to help people who have autism. The thing is, each of those things, it requires an understanding of what's wrong. People on that end of the spectrum can't tell you what's wrong. They can't tell you what it's like. They can't rationalize it for you. They cannot do that. We can. So listen. Because there's never been a shortage of people saying it. There's never been a shortage of people saying it. There has always been a shortage of people listening to it. It's not wrong for us to have it. There's nothing wrong with us for having it. But we can overcome our difficulties because our brains are filtering less. We can still perceive the outside world. We can still live here. But people on the other end of the spectrum are filtering so intensely that you have to understand that the filtering, you have to learn how to deal with all the stuff coming at you. So in a way, as we get older, our brains adapt, and that's why we only have a social delay. We are not actually doomed to never understand social interactions with NTs, although there are certain ones that will always be something that we disagree with because we understand them on a different level. That's okay, and a lot of people even pass for normal because it's not actually all that different. And the nature of humanity is diversity. There are differences in all of us. So whenever we do this, it is a perceived within normal range difference. But whenever we're kids, it's shit. Anyway. Because, we still have to get to that. We still have to, learn how to make that work in the world that we live in. We can still do that. But they're not even really... Some of them were, I imagine some of them can perceive more than others. Because there's it's a sliding spectrum. Like the little girl who doesn't really respond to her parents, but she can perceive the colors of her paintbrush, and she can paint beautiful paintings, but somewhere in there her cat comes through. I'm sorry, that one always makes me want to cry. Because it's beautiful. And someone reached her. Doesn't matter what or who. It gives her family hope that she can be reached. And it means that she's not alone. Because I imagine it's pretty lonely. See, we have emotional responses too. But in a weird way, we're aware sometimes. Because I'm not sure if this is really nature versus nurture, though. Because that can be nature versus nurture. A lot of us go through a lot of shit that teaches us to separate our emotional reactions. Because our emotional reactions are too much for neurologically typical society while we're growing up. Now, this is somewhat necessary, but it also gives a different perspective. It's not wrong, just different. Sometimes if you put together a bunch of different perspectives, you can actually get something better, something more clear about something. So, like, I think it's wrong to ignore an actual perception from somebody who has it, from people who have it, but are higher functioning, and just be like, yeah, we think we know what this is. You don't know shit. I mean, that's what I feel like saying to people. You don't know shit. It's not that they don't feel. The same way that a lot of people with Asperger's, to some respect, shut down outwardly because of everything, and often more because of the social crap coming at them and the way that people project. Also the way people react to those feelings. So you think of it like all the stuff that other kids go through that's bad is worse if you have Asperger's. So, like, don't do the stuff that's bad and nobody suffers, but, like, do it, and then the kids with Asperger's get it worse. So, yeah. But the kids that are on the other end of the spectrum, it's not that if you hurt them, they won't feel it. It's not that they don't have feelings. It's people with autism can vary in as many ways as other people can. You can be a sociopath and have Asperger's. And you can be not a sociopath. The thing of it is that it's its own issue and it doesn't necessarily come by itself all the time. The same way that other people have diversity. So wait. It's because it's not a different brain, it's a different operating system. Like, sorry, but we're still people. We're not more dangerous, we're actually less dangerous because we're more sensitive to this shit. So, like, we're a lot less likely to go and start a war and shit because it tears us up. But you can actually damage people. And whenever somebody with Asperger's becomes this person who's like, I don't feel anything, it's because you've done hella damage, and there are feelings in there, but they've gotten to such a point they don't want to acknowledge these feelings anymore because they're shitty feelings. So stop being shitty. I mean, they're shitty feelings, okay? The same thing happens to neurologically typical people. And there's more than enough precedents to make the comparison. It's not that different. It's actually pretty similar. It's pretty much the same. Because this can happen in neurologically typical people too. It's just easier to do that to someone who has Asperger's. The same way it's easier to teach someone with Asperger's to accept abuse. Whenever you are taught your whole life that you are responsible for everything for every faux pas in an interaction to the point of madness, and I'm calling it madness because it gets really bad. Like, people basically project that everything is your fault because they perceive that you have a problem and therefore everything is a symptom. This is the problem there. People with Asperger's aren't actually wired to just put up with more crap. It's more teaching people with Asperger's that their personal boundaries don't matter. Or that they matter too much. That can have the opposite effect. Like, just treat people like people and you'd be surprised what goes on. I mean, someone with Asperger's who grows up not being told you are Asperger's, which is basically what it is to have a diagnosis nowadays, they grow up being treated like a normal person. And you grow up to be a lot more well-adjusted. That's because you're not actually that different as far as you're wired to be. It is sensory, not... It's just sensory. And that sensory is sort of like it results in some social awkwardness earlier on, but you're not actually that different. You're pretty much the same as everyone else, just with some added sensory stuff. But